So, hey everyone, and welcome to Vertical Playpen. I'm your host, Phil. We're gonna first touch on something that you're currently working on called the Connection Lab. I think as we talk about like the work of connection and how we are connected, and I think a lot of stuff always boils down to how do we connect with people. So, what's your philosophy or thought on it as it relates to the work of Fulcrum and the Connection Lab?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'll say we haven't broken bread yet.
Yes.
Leave room for some possibility. But you're right, we always pass each other at conferences and we're both usually working or running a booth or things like that. But I will say before we even start, we've sent some of our facilitators at Fulcrum out to your guys' trainings that you have run. And our team has always, well, our team came back with rave reviews. And so I just want anybody out there to know if you ever send folks to the way of High Five or Phil, they are in very, very good hands and will be taken care of and trained well. So, um, okay, well, let's see. I think in our work, Phil, we throw around that word a lot. Connect, connection, connected with our groups, with the work that we do and all of that. So I've just been, I don't know, recently just exploring what that is, what that means, what it means to connect, how different people connect. We do a lot of work with disc and take flight and styles and how each style connects. So I'm in a new city. I just moved to Nashville 2 years ago. So that word connect has been very prevalent over the last couple of years of connecting to my new community, my neighbors, our group of friends. So anyways, yeah, I've just been exploring it a little bit and playing with some things in some recent workshops that I've done around why people connect and what there is to get from that.
I'm intrigued by like you've experienced an almost like connection in a real sense when you're going to a new place now and you're having to interact with that. Like I think as facilitators, we facilitate something, but we have some more, I wouldn't say control, but like we have some guideposts to be able to help that form. What is it like for you going into a new city and just and having that reframe of connection for you? Like what has that changed in your perception?
Yeah, good question. I was in Los Angeles for almost 20 years. So after a while, my connections and my social circle were pretty established. And so from that part of my life, I hadn't had to put work toward that. Like connecting with, colleagues and, clients and things like that has ever changed. Always for me personally, I felt like I had a really strong social circle. So coming to Nashville, it was a whole thing around, my wife asked me, we were in this parent group and she asked me the question. So, there's some of the moms that I've been connecting with, which one of the husbands or partners have you connected with? Or do you feel most connected to? As we were sort of talking about, oh, it'd be fun to do a little double date with so and so and so and so. She asked me the question. And I had to really think about it because I was like, well, there's a couple of the partners that like made me laugh. One of them I talked sports with. One of them I got in a really deep conversation about work with. So I was really like internalizing my part in how I've went about connecting with some of these new couples and neighbors and things in our hood. I think and I had a lot to say about it. I was like, well, there's kind of some surface level connections, and then there was one um of the partners where like he literally asked me, and he led with this. But he said, "What's been your most challenging part of being a parent the first 8 months?" And then we got into some deep stuff, And so what I really appreciated about that was his question. His like he was leading with vulnerability, sort of opened up the door for us to have a much deeper connection, even in a small 20-minute conversation. And so I started thinking about when I'm out and about, when I'm socializing, what my questions are like. How I don't want to say controlling, but how I'm able to at times dictate the level in which I connect by the questions I'm asking, because he asked me a very, I would say, deep question that led to some great conversation.
I think it's interesting because we work in the realm of adventure.
Mhm.
Like with adventure comes risk, and we often talk about like the physical risks and how do we mitigate the physical risks from a
Mhm.
perspective of harnesses, helmets, rope, all of these things that we can help to mitigate risk. But one of the things I think is really important in adventure that when we talk about is like the social, the emotional, the psychological risks. And there is risk in being vulnerable and asking a question like that guy asked you, right? Like
Yeah.
going up to a stranger and being able to just go straight away deep into it. But you had that response of like, wow, there's meaning there. That it's obviously better than if someone just asked me about my football team that I support or something like that. How do What in terms of your like, you're leading this connection lab, what's the process by which you're trying to get people to be deeper? Is it the when you're framing it to your participants, is it around the questions that get asked?
That's a great, yeah, good question. I've always, sorry, not always. One of the things I've worked on as a facilitator is not is to shy away from having like an end in mind, right? So one of the reasons why I've identified with calling it the connection lab is because in my mind a lab is an experiment. It's an exploration. And so I think sometimes, and you know this as well as I do, as facilitators, we do have a sequence or an end in mind. Like we kind of know where we might be taking them. Now, what happens in the middle, we don't always know, but we kind of know from experience that a certain sequence works or that a certain activity might bring up certain conversation topics. So I will say, even in this connection lab, there are things that as a facilitator, I know I'm sort of bringing up. At the same time, I'm asking participants, or what my goal is to ask participants to explore the way in which they connect, or to at least observe as they go about connecting. So, one of the ways that I've been leading the sequence is just simply leading some conversation topics, right? So, throwing out a prompt and then asking them to connect with a partner for 2 or 3 minutes. Obviously, most facilitators have done things like this. And then I've been using a tool from WeConnect from Chad Littlefield that has some different color coded cards in which asks questions in a certain tone. And the participants at the time don't know this, right? So I'll ask them to join with everyone that has a purple card. Now, what they don't know is that the purple cards might be self reflection cards and the yellow cards might be fun and light cards. So they're having conversations with people that have the same color card, and you can see in the room there's some people like laughing and sort of having light, and there's other people in the room that are locked in, you know. And so at this point of like the workshop or the activity, they don't really know, they're just connecting with people. And then what I've asked them to do, what I've started asking them to do, is to start mixing different cards. So they might mix with someone from a different color. And it's at some point I reveal, I've been revealing, hey, this is what these cards, the intention of them. And so I've asked the question, like, those of you that have this color card, what's your conversations been like? Some people have said fun, like, oh, really fun. And the other day somebody said, well, our conversations have just been kind of deep. And I said, funny enough, that's actually the intention of those questions, is to be a bit deeper. And so then what I've been doing, which I find really fascinating, Phil, is I've been asking them to then answer with those tones. So I invite them to answer with responses and connect in a fun and light way. And what was really fascinating is, and I'm thinking recently, a couple weeks ago, is immediately with that invitation, the whole room got really light. But what I think is interesting is it's the same questions. It was the same deep questions that were floating in the room. People just intended to answer them fun and light. And then we did it a bit deeper, which there are fun and light questions that people found a way to connect deeper. So I think it's just been really interesting to give people some awareness around the choice they have in not only the questions they ask, but the way in which they're responding to connect. And it's been a great, kind of that example I shared with you. It's been a really interesting exploration for me too.
Yeah, and what's interesting about it is, I think that what you're saying with the lab as well, or referencing a lab, is that what I struggle with a little bit, and I've been pushing back against this for partly in the podcast, but also in my like career trajectory, is like the way the things were initially taught to me. I'm starting to critique a little bit and just say like, I don't think there's a right answer in certain areas. Like I don't think, and when I see people declare like this is the way to connect, I'm like, I don't know if that can be true because it's not true for all people, right? Like it can't be the average describes nobody, like it's when you have these like kind of averages out there. And so I think what you said in your previous answer was you want people to be curious and figure out like and start to analyze and look at it rather than say you need to always be deep or you need to always be light, but just to reference like there is depth to it. The feelings and thoughts and the connection can be changed and adapted based on that level of depth.
Yeah. Speaking of the word connect, I connect with you on that statement and I think depending on what type of trainer you are or depending on the type of work you do, you might get to lean one way or the other. I've always considered myself more of a facilitator than, quote, a teacher or a lecturer, or things where I go into a group wanting to tell them how to do something or the way to do something. And I think there are some people that train on content that requires them to be more declarative about their information. And I know that probably you have things like that as a trainer in the adventure world, where there are safety protocols that you are saying there is a way to do this. When we talk about some of the soft skills that maybe you and I and a lot of people that listen to this podcast get to do work as a facilitator, I do think it is our role and our duty to ask great questions, to have people have exploration for themselves. And I've always approached that. I was actually just sharing with one of my colleagues recently. He was going into a group working with people in the corporate world much older than him, and he was like, what do I have to tell them about how to do their job or how to run their company better? And I said, you don't have to do that at all. In fact, don't do that because you don't have that kind of experience. But guess what? You're a facilitator, have confidence as a facilitator that you can ask some great questions, and you know how to run great activities that bring up great conversations. Just don't make a statement the entire time. Just ask a great question and let them answer it. I think for young facilitators who sometimes struggle with being in a room of people more experienced or older, I think that's a great angle. Go into it as a facilitator, not a teacher.
There are many times, and I've said this to people, where it's like, if someone's coming to you and saying like, "Well, so Phil, how would you do this?" or "How would I?" My response is typically, "That is a great question." And then that's all I say. Like, "Oh, that's a really good question." Because I
Yeah.
think that like what I'm trying to get them to do is I want them to think about like that there are problems, or like, how do I solve it? But it is certainly not my job to try to fix it, because like you said, if I'm going into a corporate world, I have no awareness of what they're talking about when they're talking about return on investments and finances and all of these things. I'm there to help create that conversation, and that's what we talk about with when we're doing this.
Yeah, and I think as facilitators, it's great to lead with that, to say, look, we don't know what your world is like on a day to day. It's your job, it's your opportunity of the day to put the activities we're doing today, the conversations we're having today into the context of your work. And I think sometimes when groups aren't given that sort of invitation, permission, however you want to call it, the day stays there. As we know, like some of our best days are when they can make great connections to the activities or conversation we're having, to the work they do. And most of the time that comes from them. We provide the space and the questions, but they have to put it into their world.
Something that I think this is leading into as a kind of nice segue around this, like putting things out there, adapting, like letting people figure out things. We have some products at High Five, and we've put them out into the world, right? And what I really like is that when I hear people say, "Well, I use this in this way," and I got an email recently about our Ubuntu deck, and someone said something and said, like, "Am I doing this activity wrong?" And they describe what they're doing. I'm like, no, there's no wrong. Like you've created a new activity, and that's kind of cool. And I'm probably going to use it. Like that's kind of some of the
Yeah.
creative stuff of it. I know one of the decks that you have been particularly positive about, and you always reference to me, is our 52 Fathoms deck of cards. And so I'd love to just ask, like, how are you currently using it? What are you finding value in? And maybe where are those things that people who are listening to this aren't aware of? Like, oh, this could be used in this way.
Mhm. Yeah. How much time we got? Because I love talking about um, yeah, I ran into you guys at a conference a couple years ago, and always looking to, when you guys have new stuff. And I think it was you or Lisa or somebody that shared with me the deck, and it was very quick transaction. I didn't even really talk much about it, and then I couldn't wait to use it. And a couple weeks later, I used it with a group as an icebreaker. Just I don't know if you say the I word on this podcast, but it was in an icebreaker format, a connector, as you will. And I didn't I didn't have the intention of facilitating it in a deeper way. But right away, when I was just watching what was going on in the activity, I was like, "Oh, this could be a little deeper than a little fun 5-minute icebreaker." And so the next time I used it was with a group of about 30 college students, and I went into it leaving myself some room to explore a good conversation. And no joke, after the activity, we sat down and debriefed and reflected on 52 Fathoms for about 40 minutes. And it was in that moment that I realized it was a tool that can be used in a lot of ways. For me, I love using it for more than just a opening connector. And we can get into
Mhm.
some of those like cards and conversations, but I just think for those of you that are listening that use it as an icebreaker, hopefully through Phil and I sharing a couple things, you might have a different lens on the tool that 52 Fathoms is for sure.
I think that this is the part that I sometimes will struggle with often in a training setting or when I'm running a conference workshop, as an example. If I was to use those, so just for those people listening, it's 52 playing cards, and they all have instructions on them. You throw them on the ground, and it's like you pick them up. Do what the cards tell you to do, the instructions. Once you've completed it, then you can pick up a new one. Typically, what I'm limited to in a training or workshop setting like that is time, right? Like you don't have if I said I'm going to run a workshop, a conference, and I'm going to do activities, and then I spent the full 45 minutes, hour just on that one thing, maybe people wouldn't find value. So what is nice is that when I use them in actual programming, where I have a day program, multi-day program, and it becomes richer anyway. So what's some of the richness that you've found in that? So what are you hearing in terms of conversations? I know that we were very intentional. We put out cards that some can be done on your own, some require help from others, some require the whole team. There's so much variety in it, but what have you found?
Yeah. I think it's just a really well designed deck of cards, and the tasks, for those of you that never done it, the tasks are all over the place, from do jumping jacks to do a log roll. And one of the great things I think about the activity is that giving participants the choice to put a card back is really powerful, because if you have a card that you don't want to do or that you think someone could do better, you have the option to put that card back. The interesting thing is, when you put that card back, what has to happen? Well, someone else in the group has to do it. So I think that concept alone, just that simple rule or simple guideline, opens up some great conversation. I was just with a group in Philadelphia working with a library branch, and we did the activity. And I said, at the end of the activity, I said, I noticed about 3 or 4 of you put some of your cards back. Does anybody want to share about that? And one of the participants said, yeah, there was no way I was going to do that. There was no way I was going to do a log roll. And so I said, okay. And I said, but guess what? Someone did, because every card's in my hand, which means they're all complete. So I said, who did the log roll? And another woman raised her hand, and then we asked her, so what had you be willing to do the log roll today? And she shared. The simple question was, what is the log roll here at your branch? What's the log roll? What's the tasks that some of you just don't want to do, that someone has to do? And we had a whole conversation, 10 minutes just from that. And it led to one of the guys in the branch who literally does the dirty work of that branch. And they have patrons that come in off the streets, that, as you can imagine, in a city library, and make messes and are disruptive. And he's the person at that branch that literally does the things no one wants to do. And so just that simple concept led to the whole group acknowledging him for all the things he does at that branch that no one wants to do. And you can insert, if you're working with a school group, a corporate group, a team, that simple question of, what are some of the tasks here at the school that people do that no one wants to do? And it might lead to gratitude. It might lead to going, you know what? I don't think we should have to do that. I mean, there's just some rich conversation there, but that's just coming from a simple guideline of the activity. So that's one example. I think there are some other really great examples. Just a big zoomed out concept is that some people, I think, go about that activity trying to accomplish as many cards as possible. They pull a card, do it, put it back, pull a card, do it. And their whole mission is, I want to accomplish 8 cards, 8 tasks, 10 tasks. And you can just watch. You can see how fast they're doing things. You might have another person who pulls the card, build a shoe tower. And that person's entire mission for that whole activity is to build a shoe tower using every single person's shoe. Now, the card does not say use every person's shoe. It just says build a shoe tower. So it's a fascinating choice to see how deep people go, how much pride they take in that shoe tower. And I'm not saying if you build a shoe tower 3 shoes high that's wrong or right. That's just your choice you made. But some people will use 30 shoes and spend 8 minutes building a shoe tower, and I find that fascinating. So I think that's a great example in a debrief to ask or to notice, to observe, hey, so and so, I noticed that you spent 6 minutes building a shoe tower. Can you tell us more about that? And then let them talk and see why they made that choice.
I agree with like it's almost going if we go back to like the connector lab conversation around like just giving people the right questions, like the depth of questions. I think what this demonstrates as well is like that's that change from a beginner facilitator to a more experienced facilitator is realizing magic in the simple, whereas someone could easily have just throws the cards out, they collect them all in, and then they go and then they move on from there. But something also I want to know is like the intention of observation that you are doing. It's not a like put them on there that allows you to take a break.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I think there's value in a facilitator really participating, and there are times where I have participated in this activity. But do one or two, step back then and observe and watch what's going on, because that's where some of the rich behavior happens that nobody else is seeing, by the way. It's like because the thing about those cards is everyone's so hyper focused on their own task, they wouldn't have noticed that someone skipped around the room because it says skip around the room, don't be obvious as one of the cards. It demonstrates like that kind of blinkered mindset that we often have as well. And so it allows you to be the observer and highlight those things and bring it up to for the larger group.
100%. I think the best debriefs, the best questions that any facilitator is going to ask is from paying some close attention to what actually happens in the activity. I agree with you that, and I see this in some of our facilitators, like the activity's going on and that's like they're checked out for a second while the group is doing something, and that's where you get all of your material for the debrief. And sometimes I even will have a piece of paper. I'll just write notes so I don't forget anything. Because if there's some really good things on that note of someone skipping around the room, I think another great card is, there's a card that says make an annoying sound until someone tells you to stop. That's one of my favorite things to watch during the activity because I know it's coming. I know it's in the deck. And once I see someone start making a noise, I go, okay, here we go. Right. What's fascinating to me is that most of the time when that person starts making that annoying sound, people want to get away from them. Or they almost intentionally move away, like, get away from me. And I think it's such an interesting debrief point because if you think about the concept of the activity, and once people get into the groove of it, you need other people to help you with your cards. Like the only way to do most of these is to have someone else do something with you, for you. And so I think it's interesting. It's an interesting debrief point to say, how many of you walked away from Phil when he was making that annoying sound, and have 8 people raise their hand? And it's an interesting debrief point to say, how often in your organization, in your team, in your school site, are you so hyper focused on what you need to do that you're missing opportunities to help a coworker, to help a colleague, to lend a hand? And how long did it take to help that person? All you had to do was just look at them and say stop. Now they don't know that they have to say that, but the question is, did you even pause to know they might need you in that moment? And I ask that to myself too. I have certain projects I'm working, I have things, but nothing's more important than the programs we're running at Fulcrum today. Like this week, of the things on our calendar this week are the most important things in our company. And so am I supporting our facilitators, our staff in those things while doing my quote projects,
The flip on that as well, and I will bring this sometimes up with the group, like when we're reflecting, is what tends to happen is everyone grabs a card, they hide it to themselves, and then they go off and do that card. But there are only few cards in there that say "Don't be obvious" or "You can't ask for help." They're making a noise until someone says to stop. It never explicitly says you can't just show that card to someone.
That's right. Yeah.
How infrequent do people even not only seek out how to help someone, but even ask for help? So it's like the two sides of that are opposites against each other. We do. I bring this up often with groups. It's like how many times do we add in or build in rules, additional rules to prevent
Mhm.
us from doing the task that are not explicitly written down? There's nothing that says you can't ask for help, and yet people add in the rule that they can't ask for help, and it makes things harder for themselves. How many times do we put barriers or create barriers for our own success?
Yeah, and I think that's a good point as facilitators. I was just using this example the other day, with I was on a program and I saw one of our staff members doing an activity that I was like, "Oh, that's interesting. I've never seen that activity run that way. I've been doing this activity for a couple decades. And so I think as a facilitator, it's important to ask ourselves if we're implementing a rule or a guideline, what's the intention of it? What's the point of it? Is there something we're trying to get out of it, or are we putting more limitations than we need to on an activity? I'd much rather have the group come up with something, explore something, have a creative solution than have 10 guidelines and them feel like, well, there's nothing else we can do here other than this one solution. So I think when I have a staff member that's doing something in a way, my first question is, oh, can you share with me why? And if they have a great reason for that, oh, I really enjoy da 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 da. Okay, awesome. But if it's just because that's the way someone showed them or whatever, and they don't know, I might offer them a different choice.
Yeah, and this is, and I would say, like, in all of the conversation we're talking about is like, forget the boxed in framework of however something was originally taught or how you think. Be okay with the creative stuff. Like, the one of the books that we wrote is called Tinker. Is the whole concept of that was like, how do you take an activity and make it something different? And there's a part of it like, how does that benefit the participants we work with? But there's another part that how does it actually meet your authentic facilitation style? Like, if I just watched a Leo do something, I'm not going to probably be able to pull off exactly the Leo way that you led that activity. In the same way, similar for me. So it's like this adaptiveness, this flow, this flexibility, all essential components of good facilitation.
Yeah, and I'll note too, if you're listening and you use Fathom as a really fun opener, keep doing that. My intention of talking about it wasn't to say like you should be doing this deeper or this, but I think it is interesting, like you said, to start to notice what activities, how we might be able to adapt them, change them. And I noticed right away that activity, that Fathom, could be used in a deeper setting. Like you said, if you're in a workshop, of course, it's a great activity in a workshop, and you might just highlight one of those things we just talked about to just tease out what could be and have the facilitators in the room go, oh, I see. Okay. But it's also a really, as you know, it's always a hoot. It's always fun. People are always laughing. One other quick note on it too. I was doing it the other day. I like with bigger groups, I like to use multiple decks. But I was doing it the other day and I only had one deck, and I came up with, and I don't know if you've ever done this, having people do the tasks in tandems and in trios.
I
So
have
I
not
only
done
had
that.
one deck of cards. I only had 50, and I didn't wanna, like, keep replenishing them, and there was, I think, to over 25, 30 people, so I had them pair up. So I had them pair up, and they would do everything as a partnership, and it was interesting to watch that go down as well, because it gave me more cards in the pool rather than the activity ending after everyone just doing one task. So anyways, that was another little
No, I
variation.
love that. I know it's the selfish reality of the fact that because we produce them, we have unlimited decks, and I never have to think about that. So it's nice
Yeah,
to like, oh
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah, and I
that
own
makes
multiple decks, I just only had
changes the
one on me that day.
but it changes the
And I
dynamic
think that's
completely.
actually an interesting, we play this game. I don't know if you know heads or tails. It's a really simple opener, heads. Same thing. I start doing that activity in tandems, because I think when you have people do, even if for individual competition games, when available, if you have people doing it in a duo or a trio, you all of a sudden now insert another layer of the activity where they have to come to consensus about things, they have to work together. And it's really essentially you're now supporting all of the social emotional learning things that we talk about, working in a group, communicating, coming to a consensus, all of these things that is possible by just going, hey, you're going to do this with a group of 3 instead of by yourself.
I love it. I have, just to kind of conclude this conversation, I had written one thing down prior to this conversation because I was recently in a conversation with someone, and they had framed this like, when you meet someone, you should think about like, what is something you're really super curious to ask them. And I really liked like this, just being intentional of like, all right, Leo, I know Leo a little bit. I'm super curious to ask, and then I wrote this down because I've never asked this of you. When I Google Leo VanWarmerdam, this is what I find. I find that you have experience working on Survivor. So I am very intrigued about this a little bit, to the extent of like, what was your role in that production, and then how do you think it's influenced you as a facilitator? Because I'm always interested to see takes people's past experiences and how did that influence the work they do now.
Great question. We might have to do a follow-up episode
Yeah,
on Survivor. Had a really fascinating role in Survivor. I ran something called Ponderosa, which is the place where the castaways go when they get voted off the island. And so for a lot of people, they don't know when you get voted off Survivor, you don't just get sent home on an airplane. We keep you there on the island, or not on the island you film on, but we keep you on a separate island for the remainder of the show until the show's done filming, and then we fly everyone back to the US together. And I happened to be for about 9 seasons, most of the seasons in the 30s, season 30 to 40. I ran Ponderosa. So, and the casting director at the time who put me up for the position, it was kind of a side gig, said, I do think, she actually went about it the opposite. She goes, I think the work that you do in your career actually would be really great in this role because we have all sorts of personalities and everything. To answer your question, I think one of the biggest takeaways from all that that's made me a better facilitator is really to be in the moment, present with what's going on. We had, one of my jobs is, you think about it, people get voted off. They're over here with me on Ponderosa 3 days, 6 days later. They're getting someone who might have just voted them out or blindsided them. So the social dynamics in the game is one thing. The social dynamics at Ponderosa is a whole nother thing. And at times it's like, oh my gosh, good to see you. And at times it's like, son of a, what? Like, I can't believe you did that. And so navigating conflict and navigating and my whole mission at Ponderosa was to try to have people leave there better than when they came. Their dreams were just crushed. They got voted out. There's a lot of things that could take them down there. And by the time they left, I wanted them to be kind of mind, body, soul a little bit better. And they were playing a game, and sure, you're disappointed with the result, but how do we make your time out here at Ponderosa utilized in a way that you can go back feeling proud of what you did, proud of the game you played, proud of the connections you made, and that you even just said yes to this crazy adventure where you're living in the wilderness, sleeping outside, and it's a pretty talk about risk. I have a lot of admiration for people that go on Survivor. It's not easy.
No, all I'm thinking is like, wow, what the value of a facilitator to watch a behind the scenes documentary on Ponderosa versus the actual
Yeah.
show. It's like that feels richer in a certain way, the dealing of conflict. What were some of the like strategies, like what were you doing to try to mitigate some of that as people are coming in? Because I can imagine this, you're dealing with such different personalities coming in. They're already
Yeah.
experienced through the voting system, but now like, what were some of
Mhm.
the things you were doing? Were you hosting events? Were you doing team
Yeah.
development programming?
Well, first of all, you think about it, they're putting big personalities on the show, right?
Yeah.
Part of the show and being on a reality show, especially, you wanna have big personalities, big stories, and so on the show, you want them to have those come out. And at Ponderosa, our goal is to kinda, like, tone them down, but you don't always get to do that. I think one of the biggest things is people, right when they get voted off and they come, like, honestly, we tribal council goes till about 11:30 at night. We get on a boat. I'm on the boat with whoever got voted out. We get back to Ponderosa, sometimes 11 midnight back to our island. And whoever previously at Ponderosa, they're staying up late because they want to know who got voted out because they don't know any results. So they're up like, okay, who's coming next? A lot of times everyone wants to hash everything out right there. Like they want to just unpack it all. And I think, one of the things that we always tried to invite the castaways to do is like give that person an evening to eat. They're hungry. They haven't eaten, so give them a chance to eat. Maybe take a shower. Let them decompress. Sometimes they might want to talk about what happened in the game, and other times, really, it's just like let's just wait till tomorrow. Like, get a good night's sleep. I think that's actually some pretty good advice for all of us, right? That when you're in the moment, when we're in the moment of conflict, sometimes we're not making the best choices on how to go about resolving them, or sometimes it's just a walk away or a take a breath or take a day of, So I think that was one thing we encourage people to do. And a lot of times I would see two castaways the next morning sitting on a hammock talking. And I'm like, that's healthy. That's like a really healthy conversation rather than like the night that person got voted out. And sometimes they did it. Sometimes that person would engage and they want to talk about it. But I think a lot of times it was, and honestly, for the most part, Phil, and this speaks a lot about the people that go on the show, I would say for most of them, by the time they left with their head held high. I think, and I mean, they have plenty of time. You think about it, if you get voted out first in Survivor, it's like sometimes it's day 1, day 2. You have 37 days at Ponderosa.
Yeah.
So, and we're on an island in Fiji. in the middle
Yeah.
of nowhere. I mean, there's no technology, there's no, and I always did my best to try to, take them kayaking, stand up paddleboarding, and play cards and have fun, journal. I mean, but after a while, they're in their head and there's a lot of reflection that takes place out there.
Their reflection on their experiences, they hung out more with Leo than they did with Jeff. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah, yeah,
it's like,
exactly.
yeah. Well, also, I appreciate that because I think like just these different experiences that people have, like in that kind of experience of like like high personality types, no
Mhm.
doubt allows you to be able to work with groups and think like, oh, I've seen some of the extremes that I've had. I've seen some of the conflict moments that, and I can draw from that. And I think that's something I often say to a lot of facilitators. Like, you have an experience when they say they're new. Like, oh, I'm new. Well, you've got a lifetime worth of experience where you've probably had some stuff that's happened. You've seen some things, and that can benefit the work that you do now. So, drawing upon that is so important.
Yeah, I mean, just, before we pushed record today, you and I are talking about what it's like to be a dad and to have, you have a 10-year-old, I have a 14-month-old, and those that are listening, that have kids, there's so much that we could do a whole episode on the parallels of being a parent and being a facilitator and that experience.
Yep.
I just
Yep.
traveled across the country 2 days ago, 5 hours, and just the experience of the plane ride, staying in the pocket. I had a mentor one time that says, "Just stay in the pocket. Just when things implode, if you're ever in a group and things, just hang in the pocket. Don't take it all on. Hang in the pocket, and that's your job as the facilitators is just keep that neutral energy as much as possible."
Someone said that recently because I had something going on in a group, and someone said, "Phil, you stayed really, really calm." I was like, "There was nothing I could do otherwise." Like what's the help in going anyway? It's like other than just exactly that, stay in the pocket and just realize like I'll add my influence, and my influence will be just calm and say it's all good rather than react. And I think about that with like so many different elements to facilitating in the work that we do anyway. If I could like wrap this up, I would say centrally what we've been really talking about is the ability to observe, to watch what's going on, to ask the deep questions when necessary and answer in the deep ways when necessary, but know that we have control over that factor. And that's the power of like the work that we get to do is we're in that moment, take the calmness, take the tone, take the opportunity to observe and ask the right questions.
I dig it. That was fun, Phil.
Awesome. Thanks.